Hi Kanak. Hi Bhavna. Hi Kanak. Hi Bhavna.
Hello, guys. I hope you all are excited for the session. Do let us know in the chat how excited you all are for the session. Yeah, hi Sandeep, you are from Hyderabad. Awesome. We will be just starting in 5 minutes.
So hi folks. Good evening to everyone joining from India. So my name is Harsh, and it would be great if all of you can introduce yourself on the chat. Like maybe just mention which college you are from and if you're participating in the Shebels Hackathon. Because I always try to make these sessions interactive so that everyone can learn from all the shared lessons. And if you've got any questions beforehand, you can just put that on the chat itself. So we do have an audience questionnaire, so we will just go through that once the whole session starts. But glad to have all of you on board.
Yes, Bhavna, let's start.
Yeah, awesome. Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well. And
Let's start at 7:05. Many people are still joining, maybe.
Yeah, okay, let's wait.
till then, you guys can introduce yourself in the chat so that Harsh can interact you as well. Yeah, here I can see the people are from Nigeria as well. I think we can start now. Here I can see in the chat there are a lot of people from different university and different part of India. It's quite awesome. So hello everyone. I hope you all are doing well and enjoying winters. So I did like to welcome you all in fourth workshop of Shebils. So Shebils is basically the India's largest diversity focused hackathon, and we packed up with amazing swags, networking opportunities, prizes, and unforgettable experience as well. So you have an idea for app, hardware project, Web 3.0, and everything else you can build out in this particular hackathon that is She Builds. So it doesn't stop now as well. So we have surprise for all of you, and we are giving all of you two mystery boxes in the workshop itself. One on the basis of the activity, and one randomly on the basis of the Google form we shared in the chat. So let's start. So today we have Harsh with us. He will be discussing about crucial thing regarding open source, basically getting the most out of the open source program, like as GSOC outreach and everything will be coming soon. So so now I would like to welcome Harsh in the session and hand over the mic to him. Would you like to introduce Harsh?
Sure. So maybe I can start sharing my screen and I can just go through the entire thing. So hi everyone, and first of all, thanks for joining today's session on getting the most out of open source programs. And in this session, we are going to discuss a few of the most crucial things that is necessary for all of you to get started with open source development. So unlike a lot of sessions that you might have gone through on open source and GSOC and all of that, I'll try to take a more generalized view about how you should be approaching open source programs. How should you be like tackling the different application process of them? And I will not be going into specifics of each and every program like Google Summer of Code or Outreach internships. Since Shebuilds Hackathon is a diversity-focused hackathon, I would also be covering some of the more diversity-focused open source programs as well, and might share a few tips and tricks around how you should be approaching them out and what you should be doing next, like because open source is a very broad term, and a lot of people might be interested in what comes after open source. Like open source is not just limited to programs. There might be a lot of different career opportunities out there. So we are going to talk about a lot of these things itself. And this is a completely open stage. So if you have got any questions, if you have got any insights that you would like to share, please put that on the Google Meet chat. Otherwise, I also have a Slido link open. So anything that you want to put over there, you can simply do that using the code that I will share. Or else you might want to say something, you can just raise your hand and you can directly speak it out. No questions asked. So that's pretty much it. And talking about myself, my name is Harsh, and currently I'm working as an engineer at LocalStack. I'm not sure how many folks over here might be familiar with what LocalStack is, but just to give a very brief understanding of what LocalStack does, and it basically builds out AWS emulators. So just imagine running your AWS applications offline, completely on your own laptop without having to connect to any AWS account. So we basically build cloud emulators over there so that companies can just test their AWS applications, they can integrate it out and do more of that. I'm also an open source maintainer and a Google Summer of Code administrator at Mojo Global. And over there, I have been mentoring for almost every open source programs that we are taking a part in. So programs like Google Summer of Code, Google Season of Docs, LFX, outreach internships, and more of that. So Mojo Global is an open source organization that is into climate change and action domain. So we build tools that allows governments, institutes, and different organizations to remove out greenhouse gas emissions in the land use sector. And we facilitate that using a framework that we are developing and actively maintaining upon. So if you wish to connect with me, you can reach out to me on any of these individual links. LinkedIn and Twitter are the most preferred ones. Or you can directly take a look at my work upon my GitHub or my personal website itself. So that's pretty much about me. And unlike other sessions, I just don't want to speak about myself. I want to also know about you as well. So that's the reason we would be doing a separate audience participation. And I guess most of you have introduced yourself on the Google Meet chat. But I also want to understand and know about what kind of experiences you come with. Like, what is your perception about open source? What is your perception about open software development and more of that? So it would be great if everyone can go to slido.com and you can just enter this code over there so that you can basically participate in this particular audience session. So all that you need to do is to go to a separate tab on your browser, or maybe use your mobile browser itself. Go to slido.com and basically enter this particular code over there. I can share this code on the Meet chat as well, so that you can just easily happen to copy paste this. And it would make it easy for us to conduct all the Q&A sessions and also to know about you as well. So if you're joining from a web browser itself, all that you need to do is to go to the slido.com and basically enter the code over here. And once you enter this code, you will be a part of this session, and you can use this to answer all of the questions that I'm asking, or put up any questions that you think I can possibly best help with. Cool. You can optionally also just scan this QR code to enter this particular session. I hope most of you might be able to join this. I'll just wait for a few more seconds for everyone to sign up over here. I guess I can get started with this now. So I have the very first question over here. Have you contributed to open source before? I guess there are some pretty easy responses here. Yes, no, maybe. No, okay. So we do see that there are a lot of folks who have not contributed to open source before. Cool. So we do have a lot of folks who have also contributed to open source. Anyone who has contributed to open source here, like what kind of organizations or what kind of projects did you contribute in? Maybe you can put that on the chat itself. Okay, Sidhesh has contributed to Hacktoberfest. Bhavna has contributed to ArduPilot. I guess I've heard this name somewhere before. Bhavna, can you tell what ArduPilot does? Okay, Kanak has contributed to Ivy, Hacktoberfest, Social Summer of Code. I guess that's the rebranded name for Script Summer of Code, because I was a part of that. But yeah, 24 PRs, that's quite a humongous number. But still, we have more than 60% of folks have not contributed to open source. So maybe we'll discuss about that as well. And maybe I can bring up some fresh perceptions about what open source is and how it can help you in your career. But for the rest of the folks who have already contributed, maybe you can also check out the last part of this whole session to see how you can ace these open source programs as well. Cool, so 48 people have already responded. I guess I can move to the next question. And it is pretty simple. What is your experience in development and building software? Because this is one of the trends that I have been noticing for quite some time, is that a lot of people are more interested towards open source, but they are not very intrigued about software development. It may be because that there are a lot of different open source streams, but I wanted to separately take out some time to talk about software development as well, because if you are into open source, you should be into software development as well, unless you are not part of the tech field or whatsoever. Cool, so there are some folks who are pretty much intermediate in open source, in building software and all. Anyone who has built some kind of a software before, maybe some project, maybe some tool, you can put that on the Google Meet chat if you want to share some of your projects out there. Okay, we do have some experts over here as well. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. So if you're an intermediate or an expert, just put out any GitHub repository or put out any project that you have built out previously, so that everyone can learn from your experiences. Otherwise, if you don't want to share that, that's completely fine. So Ankush has built something called as Desonity. It's a Unity 3D package for game developers to interact with Deso blockchain. This is pretty awesome. Cool work. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not a Unity fan, so I won't be able to say much around that. Aditya Mittal has built a ground-based station for autopilot. That's also awesome. Cool, so pretty nice responses over here. And I guess we can move to the last part of this questionnaire. And have you considered participating in open source programs? I would definitely want to hear someone who says no over here. Why do you not want to participate in any open source program? Okay, so there are a lot of folks who don't want to contribute. Cool, so I guess I do have a niche audience that I can try convincing during this session. But if anyone who is not interested to participate in any open source program, what makes you think so? Please put that on the chat so that even I can know from all your experiences. Cool, so I guess I have got most of the responses over here. So that's pretty great. And again, I will be closing the questionnaire right now, but definitely the Slido will be open for all the Q&As and everything. And please, please, please put all the questions that you have over here. I will separately go through each one of that at the end of this session. And yep, let's get started with the whole thing. Cool. So I have a very niche agenda for today's session. First, we will be talking about why do software development. And if you're someone who is starting up with open source right now, it is very, very important for us to know around what software development is, because open source as a domain is pretty much centered around building and maintaining software itself. So no matter what field you are coming from, it can be design, it can be writing, it can be accessibility or something else. Understanding software development is very much important to understand the kind of impact open source development brings. The second one, we are going to talk about open source contributions, how you can build out a career in open source, and why open source is not just limited to separate programs. Because I have seen a lot of folks who share this fact that open source is just limited to programs. So like back when I was in my second and third year, I heard one of my seniors saying like, why you should be doing Google Summer of Code? After all, you have to sit in your college placements. And it simply did not make sense to me around why I should not be using open source as a way to leverage my career further. And that's the reason I'm working pretty much in an open source company right now. And finally, we will be talking about how you can leverage these open source programs. Again, as I had mentioned before, I will be talking in a much generalized view. And if you have got specific questions about any separate program, you can pretty much put that on the Q&A channel itself, and I can just take that up separately. Cool. So let us talk about why do software development. And I see that there are people from a lot of different nationalities over here, but I guess the general message will kind of resonate with everyone out there. So why exactly you should be doing software development, and why you should be focusing upon software development in your college time itself? Because after all, you are going to join some company once you graduate, and you can pretty much learn the niche and the art and the tips and the tricks of software development after all. So why you should be basically bothering about it during your college time itself? So let's take the example of any modern day college student. Maybe take the example of me, or maybe take the example of Bhavna or anyone else out here. So most of the times when we join a college, again, a lot of people might have different complaints about the kind of college or the university that they have joined. But in most cases, this is exactly what the journey looks like. You're in your college and you are learning out different engineering subjects like engineering maths, physics, chemistry. Then you get into data structures, algorithms, core computer science concepts like databases, operating system, compiler design, and more of that. And as soon as you enter in your fourth year, you're basically put out in the placements. And now you have to build out for the industry. And in the industry, things are drastically different. You need to deal out with frameworks, you need to deal out with libraries, you need to deal out with tools. And now your mind will just be buzzing, like why I should not be learning these kind of things within my own college time itself? Why should I be bothering about these myriad of subjects that are not contributing anything worthwhile in my profile? And this is one of the reasons why people get so much frustrated of software development, because some of the most common things that the software development journey should be like used for, like concepts like debugging, concepts like understanding how CLI works and all of that, these are not inculcated until and unless you get inside the industry. So it is a frustrating journey for most of the folks out there. And that's the reason why there is a much more optimized view about what your journey should look like. So let us take an alternative look over here. So over here, we are getting into the industrial internships and jobs. But apart from just indulging ourselves into engineering, core CS, data structures, algorithms, and more of that, we are getting started, first of all, with development projects. So these development projects can range from a lot of different things. It can be your personal projects. It can be your hackathon projects where you try to build out something within a team. It can be an open source project where you're contributing to those critical software components that are being used by millions of people across the world. And all of these experiences can help you understand software development in a much better view. So why you should be like bothering about software development after all? Because most of us are pretty much in the learning stage right now. We are learning some basic programming languages. We are learning some basic tools out there. So why do you think that software development can exactly help you out, like in building your skills out there? So one of the reasons why software development is so much important for us to learn and basically inculcate is because of the different avenues that we have got through which we can learn this particular field. So right now, software development is not just limited to building out your personal projects. It can encompass a lot of different fields out there. It can include internships that you can do in pretty much any year of college that you're in right now. You can capitalize upon sponsorships, like maybe you're developing some critical software, and maybe you think that with the help of a sponsorship, you can develop something more. So there are multiple sponsorships out there, and you can basically attract sponsors through third-party tools like GitHub Sponsors, Open Collective, and more of that. We have got fellowships where I guess Bhavana and me have also participated in the MLH fellowship right there. So it provides a very good learning platform for us to get a guidance from a mentor and contribute to the projects out there, or basically build out projects for the general masses. We have got hackathons, and I guess pretty much everyone in this session is participating in the Sheebles hackathon. Apart from all of this, we also have got other programs, and one of the things that I would be focusing upon the entire period of this session is open source itself. So open source allows you to contribute to the software that is being critically used in a lot of different ways around the world. We have got apprenticeships, and I guess this is being practiced by companies for a lot of time. But more recently, there are companies like GitHub and more of that are releasing out apprenticeships. We have also got externships. We have also got learning programs. So as you can see, like software development is very incentivized right now. And most of these incentivized fields allow us to learn software development in a completely sustainable manner. They don't just provide us mentors and the avenues to learn. They also provide you some stipend or some compensation through which you can make your learning sustainable. Like let us say you are a budding Web3 developer, and now you want to develop some Web3 projects. So there are so many companies out there that are providing bounties, tokens, and sponsorships out there so that you can continue developing upon your projects. This is the kind of opportunities that software development is basically providing to you. And as Swift, who happens to be the chief executive officer of MLH, mentions that with this whole COVID-19 pandemic, there is a very massive shift in how online education and how remote work happens. And it is quite like uncertain for a lot of different people, including interns, employees, and employers as well. And with the help of these kind of programs, you can essentially capitalize upon them, and you can keep building upon the things that you're quite interested in. So how you should be exactly getting started with building stuff? Well, the very first thing that you should be doing is building out a skill. And building a skill, like by this term, I don't exactly mean that you should be working quite hard upon particular tools, technologies, and all of things out there. You should be just figuring out what exactly you're good at. It can be completely different domains altogether. Like it can be maybe front-end development, it can be back-end development, it can be DevOps, it can be systems engineering, it can be more of that. So the first thing that you should be doing is figuring out what exactly you're good at. The next part would be figuring out is what exactly your interests are in. Maybe you like design, but you're not quite interested to write a lot of code for that. Maybe you're interested in learning how systems work and how systems work at scale, but you might not be interested in configuring those things out. So this is kind of a self-realization journey where you figure out at what exactly you're good at, and then you figure out at what exactly your interests. And if there is a mismatch between both of them, then that can turn very bad for you. The next thing is what exactly would you like to work on and what skills are in demand? There are many a times where you will see that you want to learn this particular skill and these are your interests, but these kind of things are not yet in demand. This was one of the earliest dilemmas of Web3 developers who were starting up, because there were so many tools and technologies out there, but there was simply not enough demand for it. Until that changed almost a year back, when Web3 simply got quite popular and more Web3 jobs started pouring in. So you should also try to pick up a skill that you can use to basically work upon, and that can exactly be sold to some company who is exactly looking to hire people for that kind of roles. So once you have figured out these kind of things, the next thing that you should be doing is exploring. So you should basically pick up on things and you can start doing them until you find what interests you. You can try to learn by doing and experimenting. So basically picking up something, try to build upon that, try to experiment it upon, and try to see like how it basically makes sense to you. If things simply get boring for you, you can jump upon that particular domain and you can jump to any other separate domain and you can start finding your next passion altogether. This is one of the things that I did when I was in my second year of college, because I was so much into machine learning and data science that I completely forgot my basics altogether. And once I saw that this particular field is getting boring for me, I just jumped upon things and I started finding out what are the different things that I can basically build up my expertise upon. And finally, once you find what your particular expertise is, try to build out a depth so that you can be someone who can talk with some responsibility. So like, let us say you are quite intrigued by DevOps and now you're very much interested in learning DevOps tools. So don't just try to cover as much breadth as possible. Try to also go into the depth and try to figure out at what exactly drives you in this particular field and what exactly your particular expertise holds upon. Because once you figure out your expertise and once you go into depth with that, You can be someone like whose advice and whose experience can be completely relied upon. And this is exactly what makes you a good software developer. If you happen to intern or if you happen to work at any particular company, you will always see that there is one or the other particular engineer who has very good expertise upon a few critical components. And this is what drives them to be so productive and so critical to the overall company's functioning after all. So always try to build a depth and try to build an expertise upon whatever you're learning. And then it would make sense for you to push further with whatever you're trying to pursue. So now I have talked about a lot of different ways in which software development is incentivized. And as I mentioned, one of the ways is open source contributions. So now you might be asking like why open source contributions matter. And as a lot of people have already mentioned in the audience questionnaire, a lot of you have not contributed to open source before. So we'll talk about that a bit, and we will figure out at why open source contributions matter after all, and what do you think will make you good in open source. So before bothering yourself with open source, we must always take a look at a few numbers because numbers reveal a lot of things and it will basically reveal a state of the open source landscape after all. The very first thing that we actually see is that 80% of the maintainers always have troubles finding new contributors. And it is a very common issue with a lot of different organizations out there, including us. We have a lot of projects, we have a lot of different things that we want to maintain. And we're always looking out for new contributors, but we simply don't find enough people who are exactly ready to contribute. It can be for a different reason. Maybe sometimes we don't have the required funding so that we can sustain their work and we can basically sponsor their work. Sometimes they might just find it quite difficult to understand our project and the things that we're working upon. Sometimes they might be just demotivated by seeing the state of our code base or the documentation and more of that. So we always have a difficulty finding new contributors after all. Apart from this, there are 52% of the developers who want to contribute to open source, but 33% of them just don't know where exactly to start. So this might be due to a lack of documentation or lack of developer-friendly resources, or it might be just that the developer is simply not skilled enough, which is almost 31% of the cases itself. And finally, the number that is the most important is that the 92% of the employers always find it difficult to hire open source talent. So there are so many companies out there that are looking to hire more and more of open source developers. And it is for a lot of good reasons that I'll talk about a bit later. But all of it exactly showcases about why you should be getting started with open source after all right now itself. So one of the things that you might be asking, like with open source itself, like is open source just about participating in programs? Because when we talk about open source, the first thing that clicks on us is the different programs that are associated with this. Like there is Google Summer of Code, there is Google Season of Docs, there is outreach internships and more of that. So if you're asking yourself the same question, like whether participating in open source is just limited to participating in programs, the answer is pretty much no. You can use open source to build a career in it. And there are so many open source companies out there that are looking out for open source developers. And that was one of the things that I mentioned while I was talking about the statistics, that 92% of the employers find it difficult to hire some good open source talent. So by working on open source, you are actually building out a very credible proof of concept and a proof of work that you have the required skills and the competencies that are required to contribute to any given project. And I guess this is one of the most important parts about contributing to open source, because apart from all of the personal projects or the hackathons or anything that you're doing out there, open source basically allows anyone to visit your profile online and just check out all the different work that you're doing. If you want to go and check out the kind of work that I have did in my past, you can just go to my GitHub account and you can check out the different projects that I'm doing and the different things that I'm contributing to right now. So this builds out a lot of credibility within the open source landscape itself. And it will also help you to build out a career in itself. Like maybe you don't want to go into the corporate pathway and you want to keep continuing to work upon open source itself. So there are a lot of different ways in which you can do that. So if you want to build out a career in open source, there are a lot of different avenues that you can particularly use. And you can particularly use them to basically grow out in the open source domain itself. The very first one is building, scaling, and monetizing your own open source projects. I guess one of the good examples that I can use over here would be LocalStack itself, since I'm working over there. So as I mentioned, like LocalStack is pretty much a tool that allows for emulating AWS applications. One of the things that people might not know is that LocalStack was developed on a subway back in Sydney, Australia. And it was pretty much developed by one of the engineers working over there. So they were pretty much bored and they wanted to test their AWS applications. And this is how they started with building LocalStack. So at the first, it was pretty much an independent project, like completely open source, and people were contributing to it voluntarily. But once a potential was seen in this whole project, we started monetizing it by constructing our own professional version on top of that. And this is how LocalStack as a company started. So if you're someone like who is already building out an open source project, maybe the best way in which you can build out a career in open source is basically by monetizing your own open source project. So you can construct an open source version for the community users, and you can start building out an enterprise version, or basically maybe let's say a professional version for paid users. And this is something that a lot of different companies are using out there. There are companies like Signos, Hashura. There are other companies like, I'm almost missing out their names, but yeah, this is how you can actually build out and scale out and monetize your open source projects. Apart from this, if you're someone who has not got those entrepreneurial mindsets right now, you can actually start collaborating with a company with an open source project. This is exactly what I'm doing right now. So you can reach out to any of the companies that are pretty much working in open source, and you can pitch out your profile, your skills, and you can give them enough incentives to hire, to basically make them hire you so that you can continue working upon their open source projects. One of the best examples of this particular case was my past company called as Quansight. For people who are not familiar with what Quansight is, and it is a data science consultancy firm that pretty much maintains a lot of different Python projects out there. So projects like NumPy, SymPy, SciPy, JAX, and all of these, we are basically the ones maintaining these kind of projects. So a lot of people like who are working at Quansight are the maintainers of these projects itself. So Quansight is just one good example that I just got to know of. There are other examples like there is Quantstack, there is Voltron Data, and there are a lot of different companies that basically pays people so that they can keep contributing to any open source project. Back at Quansight, I was working on two different projects called as SciPy and QHub. Both of these projects were being sponsored and maintained by Quansight itself. Otherwise, if you're not interested in contributing to someone else's project, you can also get sponsored to contribute to open source sustainably. There is a program that is called as GitHub Sponsors, and I guess it has given a lot of different incentives to independent developers so that they can keep contributing to open source software. So all that you need to do is basically go over to GitHub Sponsors, create your account, and open up your sponsors profile so that people who are interested in sponsoring you based upon the work that you do, they can simply pay you some monthly amount or pay you some yearly amount, or they can make a one-time payment as well so that they can keep supporting your work as well. Not just individual developers, but even companies like AWS, Google, GitHub, they have been sponsoring different like developers out there, basically for all of the good work that they have been doing throughout. So last year, I guess they also sponsored a few fixed developers in India itself. That was called as the GitHub sponsors. So I'm not exactly able to find that particular link, but GitHub basically sponsored like a few group of developers from India itself. And basically like these developers were picked upon based upon the contributions that they have done to different open source projects and all of that. So this is how you can basically use GitHub sponsors. And apart from this, there is also Open Collective, and it's a very credible tool where you can actually collect different sponsors as well, and you can use that to sustain your own open source contributions and also the open source projects that you have been developing upon. So in this way, you can actually start building out a career in open source, and you can use open source programs basically as an accelerator and a launchpad to get started with open source and use this as a career leverage so that you can keep building out your skills and you can keep moving in different directions. So you might be asking, like, I talked a lot about software development, but what about people who are not exactly into the tech field? Because over the past couple of years, one of the positive trends that we have seen in the open source is the whole open source domain has pretty much democratized. Right now, open source is not being dominated by tech pros who are just into coding and like fixing out bugs and creating out new features without taking care about documentation or accessibility or anything out there. We have seen a good influx of people who are not into technical domain, but they are quite interested into how open source works. And they come with a lot of different experiences. Some of them might be from design background, some of them might be from accessibility background, some of them might be from writing background, some of them might be coming from legal and product background. And all of this gives a lot of different incentive to people so that they can keep contributing to open source, even if they cannot code or even if they cannot like fix bugs. So apart from just coding, there are a lot of different contribution streams. The very first one is the documentation itself. And I guess I do not need to stress like how important documentation is for any open source project. Documentation is something that is almost a lifeline for any open source project out there. And if your project has not got enough documentation, it is basically putting them out for a slow death, because people who don't find good enough documentation, they will simply never get confident enough to use your product. The second part is accessibility. And I guess this is one of the most important areas where open source has seen a lot of different improvements. And it is to basically improve these open source projects for a lot of different diverse backgrounds. So people who might be partially blind or people who might be completely blind, they might face difficulties in using a product. So having good accessibility designs and having good accessibility standards is a must have for every project out there. The third one is testing. And I guess testing is a critical component for any open source projects out there. And even if you cannot code, you can actually test out different kind of software. You can suggest what kind of regressions are there, or you can even find out bugs in the present flow of the software, and you can try to report that. Apart from documentation, accessibility testing, we also have got advocacy. And this is where people are more interested into developer advocacy or developer evangelism, like people who want to who basically want to create a more outreach for these projects. So they will be creating a lot of different content out there, like blogs, YouTube videos, tutorials, documentation, or they might be going to different conferences out there and basically talking about the projects that they are exactly contributing to. Apart from this, we have got design, basically like people who are good with user interface or user experience designs, and who can basically build up a good design pattern for the entire organization to follow up. Finally, we have got mentorship and management. And I guess this is something that I'm into right now. So once you have a good enough experience with any given open source project or any given open source organization, you can dabble with open source mentorship, and you can try to figure out about what exactly suits you best and how you can support some new contributors coming up into getting started with contributing to your project. And if mentorship is not your particular fashion, you can even get into management, basically trying to create high-level strategies around how these open source projects should be functioning. And you should also try to figure out about how you should be attracting sponsors, funding, and getting more and more open source developers on board so that they can help you build your mission out and basically make sure that your open source project is quite sustainable. So there are a lot of different things in which you can contribute to open source, and all of this will basically propel your career forward towards as an open source developer. So now, since you figure out that these are the particular things that I'm particularly quite interested in, and you made your first open source contribution, you might be thinking like what you should be doing to go further now. So once you have made your first contributions, either with the help of a YouTube tutorial or maybe with the help of the documentation, the pathway simply becomes quite blurred, because you simply don't have a given hierarchy through which you will be climbing up if you want to continue contributing to open source. So if you want to dive further in open source, you need to figure out a few things. The very first one is what should your focus should be exactly upon. Do you want more of the contributions, or do you want more quality contributions after all? And this is the area where a lot of different people simply miss out upon. They simply think that making a lot of pull requests can help them get selected into open source programs, which is simply not true. So eventually you have to build upon the quality of your contributions, and it cannot be just be limited to a typo fix or a simple bug fix. As you're growing out in any open source organization, you have to take more and more responsibilities, and you need to figure out about what are the best ways in which you can make quality contributions to the organization. There are multiple different cases where someone who is a software developer might not be very good with fixing bugs or creating features. They might be more into mentoring other folks so that they can make a tangible benefit to the organization. So always focus upon the good areas where you can contribute your best in, and focus upon the quality of your contributions over there. The next one, try to adopt more and more no-code contributions so that you can make a lot of adjacent impact. So if you see my previous slide, apart from the code part, rest of the things are pretty much no-code contributions as well. Like pretty much contributions where you don't have to write any piece of code, or you don't have to like fix up any patch whatsoever. So once you have made some good enough code contribution, you can also try to dabble with the no-code contributions. This can include writing documentation, or this can include fixing design issues, or this can include uplifting others so that they can make more and more contributions. With the help of no-code contributions, you can also manage and maintain projects. These can include your own projects, or these can include some other organizations' projects, so that it gives you a sense of responsibility and a sense of upliftment as well that you are bringing out in among different people as well. And finally, whatever you're learning out from open source, try to give it back, try to pay it forward. This can include from mentoring other folks. This can include reviewing others' works. This can include just going out in sessions and uplifting others so that they can start contributing to open source. Everything is a good way in which you can make the benefits of open source known to everyone out there. So that was pretty much why you should be dabbling with open source. And I guess we are pretty much on the final agenda for today's session. And it is about leveraging open source programs so that you can be successful after all. And I guess people who are already familiar with open source now can benefit most from this, because I can just basically talk about a different ways in which you can further get into open source programs and how you can basically benefit out from it. So I have talked a lot about open source itself, and I guess there were a few negative perceptions about why we should be participating in programs. So if I have to describe why you should be participating in any given open source program, apart from all of the benefits, perks, compensation, tax that you must be getting, if I have just two words for you, that would be sustainable exposure. So open source is very good. Like, it pretty much gives you a launch pad through which you can get to know about software development, and it gives you an exposure. But what open source doesn't give you is sustainability. Just imagine you're in your final year of placement right now, like you're in your final year of studies right now, and someone suggests to you like, hey, start contributing in open source. It would simply not make sense to you, because you don't exactly know that whether contributing in this open source project is exactly going to benefit you or not. So if someone would have told me that, hey, contribute to this project, I would have simply got mad at this particular person, because I don't have a job right now. I don't have any sustainable pathway right now. And simply contributing to open source will not make things any good for me. So with the help of the open source program, you actually get some sense of sustainability, because you're not just contributing to any project randomly. You're being a part of a program. You're being a part of an organization. You're getting some fixed compensation or a stipend for whatever work you're doing. And you can easily use that kind of an experience to leverage your way throughout your software development career itself. And I guess the GSOC contributor guide pretty much sums it up quite perfectly, is that open source programs are meant to give the new developers more exposure to real world software development, like distributed development, version control, licensing, testing, communication, and more of that. So if you have any doubts about participating in any open source program, I would certainly suggest for every one of you to just go to the GSOC contributor guide, because it is the most comprehensive piece of documentation that you will find about contributing to GSOC, or even after GSOC, contributing to any other open source programs out there. I can maybe link the particular guide over here so that all of you can just have a look over it. So after all, why you should be participating in programs? The very first thing is, if you're participating in programs, you're getting exposed to the entire open source development lifecycle. And I guess I have pretty much mentioned that in my previous slide itself. It can include licensing, CI/CD pipelines, picking up issues, raising pull requests, basically going through the entire version control lifecycle, and all of these things all together. And some of these experiences might not be coming through while you're just contributing randomly to any given open source projects. The second part is, if you're contributing diligently through an open source program, it can help you with a much improved problem solving and development skills. Even before participating in MLH Fellowship and Google Summer of Code, I was contributing to a lot of different open source projects out there. If I would have shown you my resume and my cover letter, I have talked about a lot of different projects that I've contributed to, like Uber, Google, Microsoft, and more of that. But not all of these experiences can basically amount to the kind of experience that I got through MLH or GSOC itself. So while you're contributing sustainably to any given project, it can basically improve your problem solving skills. It can improve your communication skills, and it can also improve your software development skills after all. Thirdly, with the help of these programs, you can also foster domain specific knowledge. And by just contributing to any random open source project, this won't ever come through. Like, taking an example, I contributed to Mojo Global for almost 2 years now. And my skills in climate change technology is quite advanced right now, that I can say for sure. So if you're contributing to any given project that is into any domain, it can include cloud native, DevOps, climate change, maybe even some biological molecular technologies, like there are projects like NRNB that are working on that. You can pretty much foster these domain specific knowledge, and you can leverage that so that you can keep working in that sector itself. Because software development is not just one field after all. It is divided into different silos altogether. There is fintech, there is health tech, there is agri-tech, and there are multiple different sectors out there. So by contributing to open source projects, you can actually figure out the different domains that you want to contribute in. And finally, you can develop new technology skills. You can develop some soft skills like communication, or maybe presenting your work in front of an audience or in front of a community. And all of this can basically help you become more successful in your software development career after all. So Open source programs, for one good reason, are pretty intimidating. I pretty much know, like, once you go through the entire Google Summer of Code website and the kind of competition it has, it can basically intimidate anyone out there. You will be asking yourself a lot of questions like, am I skilled enough for this? Or do I understand this project? Or am I going to make the cut for this particular organization? And it is pretty much legitimate, because open source programs by design, even though they are pretty inclusive and they are welcoming to everyone out there, they do have a cutthroat competition, simply because the demand kind of outstrips the supply. So if you want to ace open source programs, there are a few things that you can basically keep in your mind. The very first thing is try to find good projects, and don't just pick up on projects because of the competition. I can basically walk through one of the examples over here. I remember when I was looking forward to contributing to GSOC back in the year 2021, when I actually got selected, I joined one of the organizations that was pretty much quite a popular organization. And there was this one project that was in the hard category. And it was pretty interesting for me is that everyone was just jumping on that project itself. And when I asked like one of the persons like why they were jumping on that particular project itself, they were like, okay, since this is a hard project, no one exactly will be picking on that, or no one will exactly try to contribute to it, or no one will try to prepare a proposal for that. So if I happen to contribute to this project, maybe I can just easily ace the competition. And I was so dead wrong on that, because like once the results were declared, no one was exactly getting selected for that project. So one of the first things that you should be doing in any open source project program is to actually try to finding out good projects after all. So these good projects should be something that exactly correlates with your skills. It should be something that you know, and it should be something that you can learn if needed. And it should be something that basically generally interests you. So don't just pick up on the project simply because no one else is picking up on it, or don't just pick up on the project because you think that it's hard and no one is going to like work upon this project or somewhat of an historic reason. So try to find good projects that exactly correlates with your interest and with your skills. And if you go to the Google Summer of Code website itself, you can find out tons of projects that can exactly match your skills after all. Like you can just go to summerofcode.google.com, uh, and you can just go to the different organizations out there, and you can pretty much check out the different domains that these organizations are working here in. So just go to past programs, maybe go to 2022 program. And let us say you're more interested into DevOps, cloud native, and more of that. You can just pick up on the infrastructure and cloud. You can figure out the different organizations that are accepting contributions on these domains itself. So this is exactly how you should be trying to find out different projects out there. Second, whenever you find out a good project and a good organization, always try to introduce yourself early to the community and mentors. Don't just wait for the organizations to actually get selected and be announced upon the GSOC website, because once organizations happen to be announced, there is a serious race that starts happening, because everyone will be joining the Slack or the Discord channels. Everyone will be introducing themselves, and everyone will be expressing interest in getting started with that particular project. And within all of that, your message might be somewhat lost, and mentors won't be able to put a lot of focus on that. So one of the good hacks for this is to always find out an organization early. Try to preferably pick out an organization before GSOC or Outreach or any other open source program officially declares them as a participating org. And this would give you enough time so that you can communicate with the mentors and with the entire community, and you can express your interest about getting started through that particular open source program itself. The third one is always try to brainstorm and share the feedback with your mentors, and always ask the hard questions. One of the good reasons why I was able to craft a really good proposal, according to my mentor, is because I asked a lot of different questions to them, and I was not simply shooting in the dark. So every open source program might have a few associated projects, and these projects might have a simple description associated with them. So these projects can be as simple as creating a simple web application to do this and that, while it can be as ambiguous as like, we have this particular problem, we want to achieve this kind of a solution, you have to build out a tool that exactly helps us achieve this. And we are completely independent upon any technology or any tool or any framework that you want to use. So one of the good ways through which you can navigate through all of these complexities is by asking good questions and by asking hard questions. Like questions can be simply like, should we be using cloud native technologies? Are we free to use any paid projects or any paid services after all? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? And all of this can basically pose the mentor some really good questions, and they might give you a lot of clear answers around what their exact preferences are. Sometimes people just simply misjudge upon it, and they might pick up on their own preferences. And mentors will simply not find it conducive enough because they might not be skilled enough to mentor you on that particular part, or they might not just find it conducive enough for that organization to continue pushing further. So always brainstorm, share your feedback around what your initial ideas were around the project, and always ask good questions so that you can get a lot of clarity about what your project might entail. And finally, start working on your proposal early on itself and always try to make good first contributions. One thing that I would like to iterate and reiterate upon is that there is no fixed number that you have to make around the contributions for getting selected into any open source program. Some people I have seen have been contributing for months and months and they still happen to get. So if you have to work upon something that is really, really crucial, it is your proposal and your profile so that the mentors simply get enough confidence that you have good enough skills and good enough insight so that you can pull out the project successfully. It is not a competition between numbers or anything whatsoever. It is a competition between who exactly brings enough confidence that they can complete this project successfully. I've seen a lot of people who have been contributing to open source projects pretty much flawlessly. They get selected into open source programs, but soon after that, they happen to be rejected. Basically, they happen to get failed because they were not able to build up those quality contributions after all. So how you should be navigating these open source programs. So one of the things that people don't discuss after all is that what you should be doing after getting selected into any one of these open source programs. What happens if you get selected into GSOC or maybe Outreachy or GSOD, and what you should be doing to be basically successful around these programs as well. The very first thing that you should be trying to do is always writing meaningful code and documentation or whatever you're basically tasked to do, and make sure that it is in a good enough state so that they can be integrated at the end of the program. One of the reasons why I've seen people getting failed during their GSOC evaluation or during their outreach evaluation is simply because they write a lot of code, they write a lot of documentation, or they simply work upon a lot of things, but it is not fit to be merged at the end of the program. You should try to see the open source programs as a fixed contract because they go on from like four weeks to like 5 weeks. Sorry, not 4 weeks. Basically, maybe 3 months to 4 months, or maybe even 6 to 7 months. And this is a fixed contract within which the organization is expecting a project to be completed. So whatever work you're doing, make sure that either it is being continuously integrated into the main repositories of the organization, or it is in a good enough state so that it can be merged finally to the open source project that you're contributing to, and it is simply not left in a lingering stage. Mentors or the org admins don't exactly like a project that is unfinished and that is yet to be merged. And if you simply have an unfinished code, it might be a sure recipe for disaster after all. Second, try to ensure that your mentor knows your work and the progress that you're making. One of the main reasons why a lot of different people fail out in the open source program that they're participating in is because the mentor simply has got no clue around the kind of work that they are doing. They might be reporting their work to someone else, or they might be doing a lot of coding and documentation or designing and all of that. But the mentor simply doesn't know what is the exact status of the work or what is the exact timeline of the project that they're working upon. If the mentor has got not enough clarity upon the project that you're working upon, they might either give you a bad feedback or they might just fail you out of the program. Third, try to engage with the community and let the benefits of your work be known. This is one of the reasons why I always say that every time you're writing out a proposal for any open source program, there should be a separate section around what are the community benefits of your project. Like how will the community actually benefit from your project and what can be some actionable metrics that the community will be deriving from it. And maybe if you're engaging with the community early on itself and letting them know that your work has been merged and this is the kind of benefits that you'll be getting out of it, it would be simply great. And finally, try to build out the skills and capabilities within the organization, try to mentor and guide others so that they can also make their first contribution. And it can also like build out some tangible benefits for the organization after all. Like back when I was doing my Google season of Docs at Mojo Global itself, I did a lot of mentoring and I was made an outreach mentor, even though I was a GSOT intern itself. So this actually brings out a lot of initiative, taking capabilities that you can do. And it can also bring out a lot of positive impact within whatever project or whatever community that you're contributing to. And finally, always try to treat out open source as an opportunity. Don't just take open source as a way so that you can earn some good compensation or you can use that as a tag. You're completely free to do that, but always try to see open source programs as a launchpad and not as a final goal. And try to treat them as an opportunity so that you can further develop your software development journey and you can further succeed in the whole tech field after all. So I guess that pretty much concludes the session for the day. And I see that we have 6 minutes left. That can be for the Q&A part. So thanks all for participating in this session and thanks for sticking with me till the end. And I guess the Q&A is pretty much open right now. So you can just go to slido.com and you can fill out the code over there so that I can start answering all of the questions that you might have about open source or software development or anything in general. Cool. So Bhavna, can we take up the questions?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So the very first thing is like how to write a good application and what format to use, what timelines and descriptions to give for GSOC. I guess I can answer all of your questions within one stroke itself about Google Summer of Code. And it would be to just go to this particular organization and figuring out and just navigating to the GSOC proposals archive. This was an initiative that was taken by GSOCers almost a year back to store all of the different projects that they have worked upon and also store the proposals that they have written so that anyone can basically refer to it. So you can go to 2021 and you can check out any of the, like, let's say any of the given organizations, like let us say NumFocus, and you can pretty much open your proposal and you can check out what they have written and how they have structured the proposal. That can give you enough idea around how you should be writing out a good application, what kind of a format you should be using, how you should be putting out a timeline, and what sort of description that you should be using. If this should not give you a good enough idea around how you should be writing out your proposals, you can also go to the GSOC developer guide that I have shared at the very start itself. And you can actually see that they have this section on writing out a good proposal. I'm not able to find it out. Let me see where it is. Yeah, it's over here. So writing a proposal, and they have mentioned all of these pointers that you can mention while writing a proposal. So name, title, synopsis, community benefits, deliverables, related work, biographical information, and sometimes organizations might have their own questions that they might want to ask. Organizations like GFOSS or CC Extractor or maybe CircuitVerse, they might ask some personalized questions like, are you applying to more than one organization, or have you contributed to CircuitVerse before? And you can basically fill all of that and you can put that on your proposal itself so that it can count as a good enough proposal for you. And finally, don't submit a blind proposal. I guess this is one of the most common mistakes that people make. Don't submit a proposal at the very end itself, because if no one has reviewed your proposal or no one has provided you some actionable feedback, it is pretty much sure that it is going into the trash can. So you should not be wasting time by writing out a last minute proposal. Always make sure that your proposal is well written before the application period actually starts. And you can use that as a way to communicate with the mentors, get their feedback, improve on that, and make sure that people can use it. Sorry, make sure that the mentors know about your project and they know about your profile so that they can easily give it a look once the whole like review process begins. I guess that answers the question. How can we transition from non-coding contributions to actual coding in open source? I did mostly documentation, HTML, CSS designing, and Hacktoberfest. I guess one of the good things that you can do is to actually start learning coding and start learning coding from a credible source. One of the best resources that I can possibly suggest is FreeCodeCamp. I guess a lot of people know about this particular web application, but this is a platform that allows you to do certifications in a lot of different things altogether. And you can use that as a way to learn out some real world skills that you can use to contribute in any open source project. So I can link it over here, but again, everyone might have their own preferences about what kind of things that they want to learn and what kind of platforms do they want to learn from. So you are completely free to use those preferences. But at the end of the day, you should have some real world skills so that you can transition from making those no code contributions to actual coding in open source. In fact, making these no-code contributions can actually prepare you for some real coding contribution, because by doing these no-code contribution, you will actually know that these are the technologies that is being used behind the project. This is exactly how the project works out. This is exactly how bug squashing or how feature requests are done. And you can use all of these insights to actually start making some coding contributions after all. It can be something as simple as fixing out a simple bug or making a simple patch. And this will give you some good enough incentives to continue making bigger features after all. So how to contribute, like what tech stacks will easily help to contribute? So there is no fixed technology stack that will easily help you to contribute. At the end of the day, it totally depends upon the interest and the kind of things that you have a liking for. I guess that answers your question. How to get started with open source contributions as a beginner? What's the most initial step to get started? Should we start with web development or Android? As I mentioned, totally based upon your interest and what sort of skills do you have. If you want to get started with open source, I guess I've already mentioned that. But all that you need to do is to figure out a particular organization that is accepting contributions, joining their community, introducing yourself to them, and figuring out one particular project that you can easily contribute to. It can be quite easy if you get started with some no-code contribution, like making some documentation changes or triaging some older issues and all of that, because that will give you a good enough idea about what the project actually looks like. And I guess once you make your first good contributions by following the documentation, you will simply be skilled enough to do other steps so that you can easily get skilled in the whole project altogether. Any tips and tricks on how to pitch yourself to open source companies? I guess the best trick that you can use to pitch out to any open source companies to go to their project and make a contribution. I guess that's the most easiest way in which you can get yourself noticed by them. And I guess a lot of different open source companies might give this as an assignment as well. They might just ask you like, hey, this is one of our issues. You can work upon that. Our engineers might be able to provide you help or feedback if you need it. And it can help us understand whether we are a good fit to work with each other. And I guess this is one of the best tricks that I have seen people doing so that they can easily get accepted into any open source company out there. So definitely use that. And I guess it would be quite easy for you. Is there any organization that has machine learning as open source main technology stack? I guess if you're talking about GSOC itself, there are multiple organizations that accept machine learning contributions. Few of the names that actually comes to my mind is ML4Sci, that pretty much develops machine learning scientific projects. And the other one is CC Extractor, because I was preparing a proposal for CC Extractor, but at the end moment, I just dropped the idea because I was not confident on working on that project itself. So I guess that answers your question. Will we get this PPT slides PDF? I have not yet thought about that, but let me just convert them into PDF itself. And maybe I can just link that on the Google Meet chat itself. I guess that should be helping out. I'm interested in Web3. Have not developed anything professionally in Web2. Unfortunately, I'm not a Web3 developer. I just worked for 3 months in a Web3 company, and that was pretty much on the DevOps space. So I don't have enough expertise to talk about Web3 itself. Maybe you can talk with Ayush, who happens to be one of the judge at the SheHacks Hackathon, and he is also a developer relations engineer at Solana Foundation. So he would be the best person to talk about it. As here are mostly as beginner, what you suggest them. If you're talking about different organizations that you can contribute to, maybe contribute to my organization, because we have a lot of different mentors that can exactly help you out. But there are many organizations out there. Like you can actually go to github.com explore itself. So GitHub has got this very nice avenue of the explore page, and you can actually check out the different trending repositories and different trending projects out there. So like, let us say you're more interested towards Python itself. So you can go to Python and you can figure out the different projects that are accepting contributions on the Python itself. And they're remarkably popular, but we are not exactly sure if you would be able to find good enough mentors who can exactly help you out with a few good contributions after all. But you can definitely use this as a way to get yourself introduced to many different projects and many different maintainers out there. And then you can use this as a leverage to find out some real communities that are accepting some good contributions. How to find and join Slack or Discord channels for organizations. I guess every organization will have a README page, and they will have a linked Slack or a Discord server. So you can just use that as a way to get yourself introduced to any different organization. Like if I can show you one example, I contributed to Metacall during my GSOC period itself. And I guess Metacall, if you just happen to see the Metacall's README itself, there will be a Telegram channel that you can join. There will be a Discord server that you can join. There is a metric server also that you can join. And this would be a good enough way for you to get started with any open source organization's communication channels. Can you please practically show us how to contribute to any GitHub project? So Bhavna, is it possible for me to like link any previous videos of mine?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So I did one of the group sessions with Scalar Academy a few days back, I guess, like almost a week back. And I guess I talked over there about like how you should be contributing like to a real-time open source project. Let me try to find that because I'm not exactly sure where that particular video is. Maybe I'll have a hard time. So if anyone needs that video, please ping me on LinkedIn itself, because I guess I'll be able to provide that, the video over there itself. I guess that should work out. How to transition from a student to developer. I guess I've already talked that in the first part of the session. Develop more and more projects, contribute to different ways through which your work can be incentivized, and work upon some real-time stuff so that you can actually get to see the tangible benefits of the work that you're doing. Won't open source make the software a little unsafe to its users? This is a very popular perception that open source is like quite vulnerable and quite unsafe for the users, but unfortunately, there is no real data that actually backs this assumption, open source is regarded as quite stable and it is quite like critical for all the vulnerabilities. Because right now we have a lot of different software delivery pipelines and all of the life cycles that we have been doing, so that we can actually figure out any different deficiencies that we are going into, so that we can immediately patch it up and we can immediately remove out all of those vulnerabilities. So one of the most popular examples of this has been Log4j. The particular bug was discovered within open source project itself, but it was solved in quite a remarkable time without causing a lot of business loss to the potential users. How to find organizations for open source contributions, especially for GSOC. The best place that you can go is the GSOC website itself, because it has a comprehensive list for different organizations that you can contribute to. Otherwise, there is a more user-friendly organization that is called as gsockorganizations.dev. And you can just use this to find different organizations that are accepting contributions. You can also filter out these organizations based upon the years that they have participated in. And I guess it will provide you some good enough information to get started with this. I guess this should help. As GSOC 2023 is already announced how to begin with basic front-end dev, start learning from Free Code Camp, do HTML, CSS, JavaScript, start building out some project. And once you figure out a particular organization that is accepting front-end contribution, just make some good first contributions and start writing your proposal. I guess that should just do good. Is it necessary to do open source when your CP skills are God level? If your CP skills are God level, I don't think you need open source after all. If you need to learn how software development works, you can simply get over here. But again, open source is a completely different domain altogether that asks for real-time problem solving, while competitive programming is more about real-time critical thinking and like picking up on already solved problems so that you can give out solutions for them. So if you think that's your calling, maybe pursue with competitive coding itself. If you think you want to make more tangible impact with all of the code that you're writing, you can get into open source or software development. I guess that should just help out. So I guess I have answered most of the questions over here. If there are more questions, please ping me upon LinkedIn or Twitter itself. And I guess I would be best able to answer over there itself. And lastly, I just wanted to upload, let me just upload my PDF over here so that everyone can just happen to use it as a future reference. Cool. So I guess, Bhavna, we are almost at an end.
Yeah, so very nice session, Harsh. Like, it's good. We learned most of the things here about open source and some open source organizations and programs. So yeah, thanks for coming and take this session. So yeah, folks, if you have more queries, you can ping him on LinkedIn, as he already send his LinkedIn and Twitter here. So yeah, and if you have still not registered for the hackathon, please apply, as Bhavna has already shared the website link and the Devfolio link. You can join our Discord, and if you have any query, you can ask in our Discord server as well. So thank you folks for joining this hackathon. And yes, don't forget to share your learnings in the form of blog and tag Hashnode and hashtag SheBuild in order to, like top 3 winners will get a Hashnode t-shirt. You can just write a blog on summary of all the sessions, or you can write blog either on one of your favorite sessions. So yeah, this is all about today's session. And we are coming tomorrow with another amazing session. So till then, thank you, folks. Bye. Have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone.
Sorry, good night, actually.